Before we start talking about the rules and regulations of this course, I want to tell you a little bit about what you're going to be studying and what logic is. Because logic is a course that's unlike probably pretty much anything you've ever had. Now, you may have had a little bit of logic in maybe your English classes or maybe some other classes. If you've taken philosophy, for instance, in the past, you've probably had a little bit. It's something that is familiar to you in practice, but maybe not familiar to you in name, and perhaps not familiar to you to the extent that we're going to be studying it. So before we get any further, I just want to give you guys a glimpse of what it is we're going to be doing. Now, in a word, logic is nothing more than the study of thinking. We do all kinds of things in logic. For instance, we identify arguments. Logic is heavily focused on the study of argumentation. But we identify arguments, we distill arguments. And what that means is that we basically extract an argument from a body of text. Oftentimes you'll encounter an argument that's presented over the course of five, or maybe one or two paragraphs, or maybe one or two pages, or sometimes an argument is presented over the course of an entire paper or book. And what we want to do is be able to break it down to just the absolute essential ingredients, and that's called distilling. You extract the key thrust of an argument from a larger text. In this class, we're going to spend a week or two just practicing distilling arguments. We also analyze arguments. We break them down into the component parts. We evaluate arguments. We determine whether or not an argument is a good argument, or it's a bad argument, or it's a reasonable argument, or an unreasonable argument. So all of this is included within the study of logic. In a formal class like this in logic, we study what we call formal structures between words, thoughts, concepts, and propositions. When you think of propositions, just think of the word sentence. They're very similar in meaning. But we study formal structures between them, and it's hard to explain exactly what I mean by this. I'm going to give you an example momentarily. But the study of logic, I had a student say this a couple years ago. He said it's a lot like mathematics for words and ideas. And that's 100% true. If you really hated math, you might not like this class too much, though you don't have to be good at math to be good at logic, but you're going to notice some similarities. We study at a high level of abstraction when we study logic, and you'll see what I mean. Even today, I'm going to give you a taste of what that's like. A lot of memorizing a body of information. You have to memorize this right here. You just have to cram this definition or cram this rule into your head. But it's the application of these rules or these definitions that's really a lot like learning a skill. And when I say learning a skill, I mean any kind of skill that you can learn, whether it's shooting a basketball or becoming a blacksmith or becoming an artist or learning how to play guitar. Those kinds of things, they just take practice, and you have to do them over and over and over again to get good at them. I don't know if you guys ever saw the movie The Karate Kid, but you may recall, if you did, that Daniel LaRusso had gotten beaten up at school, and he tried to learn karate from reading a book. And it was just kind of funny. It was a joke in the movie because obviously you can't learn karate from a book. You need a trained, skilled master there to just watch you do it over and over again and to correct you when things go slightly awry. And that's what this class is going to be like. You're going to see a lot of repetition in it, and it will be, I hate to say it, but it's going to seem tedious and boring at times. Sometimes it's going to seem far removed from anything that's real world, which actually that reference to the Karate Kid is very appropriate, because for those who remember seeing the movie, the way Daniel was taught karate was by waxing cars and painting fences and sanding floors, and he was thinking the whole time, why am I doing any of this? It seems so irrelevant to karate. But what he had learned in the process was that he had learned these various skills in karate about how to block kicks or block hits and things like that. And logic is a lot like that, or a course in logic, I should say, is a lot like that. We're going to be studying things, and you're going to probably be thinking, what does this have to do with anything? And at the end, I think it'll become, this moment of clarity where you just say, oh, that's how it all ties together. That's how I can apply this to that. We're going to get fairly quickly at a high level of abstraction, and I hope you guys will see the benefit of it. Maybe not now, but in the future. But I want to give you guys a few examples of what it is we study when we study logic. And so, without further ado, let me provide you guys an example of an argument. So here's an argument I heard somebody say once. They said this. They said, pacifism would be a great ideal if everyone would follow it, but not everyone does, so it isn't. And I want you to stop and think about this argument for a second. Do you think that this is a good line of reasoning? Pacifism would be a great ideal if everyone would follow it, but not everyone does, so it isn't. Is that a good argument? And if you think it isn't, why? What's wrong with this argument? And I want you to pause the video lecture for a second and try to come up with a justification for why you think this isn't a good argument if you think it isn't. Maybe it is. Maybe it's a perfectly good argument. You're like, yeah, that seems, very, very reasonable. I mean, pacifism would be great if everybody did it, but, obviously not everybody is going to. There's always going to be someone who tries to, get an edge here or get an edge there, or take advantage of other people who are trying to be pacifists, and so therefore pacifism won't work. But if you think it's a bad argument, I want you to pause the video lecture and think, why is this so bad? Now, I'm going to tell you guys, I don't think this is a good argument. In fact, I think this argument, as it's worded, is quite atrocious. And you might have had that sense as well, that there's something wrong here. But it's not always enough just to say, hey, you're wrong, that argument doesn't work. You need to be able to identify what the problem in the argument is. And so in order to identify this the problem in this argument, it's going to require that we rewrite it a little bit. So let's just do that. And the first sentence, just look at that. Pacifism would be a great ideal if everyone would follow it. What this is basically saying is, you have to look right here at this if. It's saying if everyone would follow pacifism, it's referring to pacifism, if everyone would follow pacifism, then pacifism would be a great ideal. So this first sentence is kind of written out of order. It's an if-then statement. If, then. But notice the then part is actually coming first. The then part is pacifism would be a great ideal. The if part is coming secondly. So we would need to rewrite it. And I'm going to just do that for you and rewrite it like this. If everyone would follow pacifism, then pacifism would be, I said good here, should have said great, but doesn't make a difference really. Then pacifism would be a good ideal. So that's how we would rewrite the first sentence. Now, then it goes on to say, I'll just go back a screen, but not everyone does. And I'm going to, just for clarity's sake, rewrite that as well. Not everyone follows pacifism. So not everyone follows pacifism. And then we can conclude, therefore pacifism is not a good ideal. And this is the argument laid out very, very clearly. If everyone would follow pacifism, then pacifism would be a good ideal. Not everyone follows pacifism, therefore pacifism is not a good ideal. Now, at this point, it may not be clear what the problem in the argument is. And so we're going to need to analyze the argument a little bit further. And if you notice here, we have certain phrases that occur. Everyone would follow pacifism. And notice right here, that appears exactly the same. Everyone follows pacifism. Well, there's a difference in mood in this statement, or it has the would here, but if we wanted to get technical, we could just say if everyone follows pacifism, and we can make it completely identical in wording here. But the basic proposition that's being asserted is the exact same. And then we have this sentence right here. Or this statement, pacifism would be a good ideal, pacifism is not a good ideal. And those are very, very similar too. And suppose that we were to just, and here I told you it's going to get very abstract, suppose we were to just let the letter A stands for everyone follows pacifism, and let the letter B stand for pacifism is a good ideal. Then you can see that there's a kind of pattern emerging here in this argument. It's saying if A, then B, and then we see pacifism would be a good ideal. Well, look, everyone follows pacifism right here. Everyone follows pacifism. That letter A would reappear. B right here. Pacifism would be a good idea. Pacifism is not. Now we haven't fully completed this yet because we notice we have these words not appear and not appear here. And what's going on is we have, in the first sentence, we have if A, then B. Now we have not A and then not B. And the structure of this argument is like the following. If A, then B, not A, therefore not B. That is the actual, what we might say, formal structure of the argument. Now, a moment ago, you guys noticed that I said we study formal structure in arguments. And this is exactly what I was referring to when I talked about that. And once we break down the formal structure of this argument, hopefully it'll begin to appear why this argument is bad. Notice over here, it's saying if A, then B, not A, therefore not B. But that just logically doesn't make a great deal of sense. And if it did make sense, then we should be able to construct other arguments that follow this pattern that would work. But actually, we can construct arguments that follow this pattern of reasoning here that are just clearly nonsense. So, for instance, let me give you an example. Suppose I made the following argument. If you shoot me, then I will be in pain. You did not shoot me, therefore I'm not in pain. Notice that that argument form doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Because, clearly you could have failed to shoot me, but I could be in pain because you punched me in the face, or I could be in pain because I tripped and fell, or I could be in pain because, I don't know, I ate a spicy burrito last night. I don't know. But this argument form here doesn't work. This argument form doesn't guarantee this conclusion down here. And this is one of the things that we're going to study a lot in this class. Now, I know I went through that very, very quickly. I'm trying to give you guys a general sense of the types of things we study. If this right here didn't make perfect sense, if you're a little bit confused by this, don't worry. You're not getting tested on this today. I'm showing you the kinds of things that we study in logic. And this right here is actually what we call a fallacy. It's what we call a formal fallacy. And that word right there, formal, might confuse some of you because when you hear the word formal, you probably think of, putting on a tuxedo or a black dress or something like that. But it's not formal in that sense. It's not formal as, you're going to, I don't know, meet the Queen of England or something. Not formal in that sense. It's formal in the sense of the formal structure of the argument doesn't work. It's formal in the sense of the form of the argument, and this is what we call a formal fallacy. And so a fallacy is just any kind of mistake in reasoning. The form of this argument is a mistake in reasoning. It actually has a technical name. It's called denying the antecedent. And that's something we'll talk about weeks and weeks from now. But this is a mistake in reasoning. We're going to study this sort of thing in logic. Let me give you guys a couple of other examples of the types of things we study so that you can have a better sense of what we're going to do. If you would, please just read along here. In order to increase production, company ABC should implement a flex time schedule which would allow individual employees some flexibility in deciding when to begin and end their workday. Studies have shown that working under flex time schedules is associated with increased employee morale. Now, what must this argument assume in order to establish its conclusion? Read again here and think about this. First of all, think of what is this argument trying to establish? How is it trying to establish it? And what is it assuming? It's assuming something. The conclusion does not follow from the premises. So what is it exactly is it assuming? And I want you to pause the video lecture and think about that for a second. What must this assume in order to establish the conclusion? So, in order to answer this question, we first have to figure out, well, what is exactly it trying to conclude? And this can be a bit tricky, but in a word, what it's trying to conclude is the first part of the first sentence. In order to increase production, company ABC should implement a flex time schedule. Now you may have thought what comes after that, which would allow individual employees some flexibility in deciding when to begin and end their work days, that's part of the conclusion, but technically it's not. That's actually just defining what a flex time schedule is, and it's not specifically needed in order to state what the conclusion is. The conclusion is just that in order to increase production, company ABC should implement a flex time schedule. Now, why? What's the reason? What's the rationale? Well, that comes in the last sentence. Studies have shown that working under a flex time schedules is associated with increased employee morale. And we can rewrite this argument so that we can see the structure of it as follows. Studies have shown that working under flex time schedules is associated with increased employee morale. Therefore, in order to increase production, company ABC should implement a flex time schedule. Some of you may have noticed that I capitalized the word "in" here. That was just a typo. Don't pay any attention to that. So what is this argument assuming? What is it assuming? Notice that the first premise, or the only premise I should say, it's in making a claim about increased employee morale, and it's associating increased employee morale with the creation of a flex time schedule. And then it goes directly from there to say, well, therefore you should implement a flex time schedule in order to increase production. What is it assuming? Notice, and this is what I want to pinpoint here, notice that nowhere in this premise does it talk anything about increased production, but it does talk about increased production right here. It talks about a flex time schedule down here. It also talks about a flex time schedule up here, but it makes a jump from talking about employee morale to increased production. So it must be assuming something about a connection between employee morale and increased production. And what it's assuming is going to be something like this, that increased employee morale, got another typo, it should be morale with an E, will lead to increased production. So read along again with me here. It says the following. Studies have shown that working under flex time schedules is associated with increased employee morale, and it's assuming that increased employee morale will lead to increased production. Therefore, in order to increase production, company ABC should implement a flex time schedule. And this is something also that's really important that we notice, or we study, I should say, when we study logic. We look at what is it that arguments assume. Because quite often what you'll find is that people will tell you their conclusion, they'll tell you part of their evidence, but then in the background they're making some kind of assumption in order to get you from their evidence to their conclusion. And these are really important to identify, to be able to identify, quite often because the assumption is what is at issue. The assumption is what is problematic. Here, increased employee morale will lead to increased production. I don't know. Is that true? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, it doesn't seem unreasonable, but I'd be curious to see what the actual evidence of this is. Something else here, too. Another thing this argument is assuming is that company ABC desires to increase production. I don't know, maybe they don't. I know that sounds kind of strange because you naturally assume that companies always desire to increase production, but I was actually just listening to an interview the other day about a skateboard company which has this desire to remain very core to the industry, to not expand to large big box stores. And so they just stop production at a certain point. They're like, no, we're not going to increase production beyond, I don't know what the units are. Maybe we'll sell like 9,000 units of shoes, and we're not going to move to 20,000 because that would just expand our company too much, and we don't want to increase production. So, this argument is assuming also that the company ABC desires to increase production. I would say in the vast majority of cases that's not an unreasonable assumption, but it's not necessarily always true either. But here what I wanted to show you guys is how the argument, it moved from this premise where all it was talking about was morale and flex time schedules to a claim about what this company should be doing. And so it had to make some kind of, should be doing in order to increase production. And it had to make some kind of bridge assumption, some kind of assumption that's going to bridge talking about increased morale to increase production. And so it had to be assuming something like number 2 up here. This is something we're going to study around, I'd say, week 2 or 3, identifying assumptions and arguments. I'll give you guys a few more examples of this just to give you a better sense of what's going on. So here we go. 3-year-old Sarah and her playmate Michael are both ill and have the same symptoms. Since they play together every afternoon, Sarah probably has the same illness as Michael does. Since Michael definitely does not have a I can't say this word, we'll just say a strep infection, despite having some symptoms of one, the illness that Sarah has is definitely not a strep infection either. And I want you to stop and think about this. Is this a good argument? I mean, basically it's saying, Michael and Sarah play together. They had the same symptoms. Michael definitely doesn't have a strep infection. Therefore, Sarah definitely doesn't have a strep infection. Is that a good argument? Are there any problems with this argument? And if so, what are they? And I'll give you guys a few options. I'll help you out here. I'll just tell you right off the bat, this argument does have a problem. And I want you to look at the list of options down here and try to figure out what exactly is problematic about it. And pause the video lecture if you don't mind and just think about this for a minute and see what you can come up with. If you said that D is the correct answer, then you were absolutely right. This argument rests on a flaw. And if you look up here at the second sentence, since they play together every afternoon, Sarah probably has the same illness as Michael does. And then in the very last sentence, it concludes that Sarah definitely does not have the same an illness that Michael does. Notice that how it slides from talking about probably to definitely down here. And that is the mistake it makes. And we're going to talk about this actually this coming week, I believe, or maybe at the start of next week, about what we call deductive and inductive arguments. And basically, a deductive argument is one that attempts to guarantee the conclusion with absolute certainty, whereas an inductive argument is one that only tries to identify or establish the conclusion with probability. And you have to be very, very careful about this, because some arguments, they'll provide you evidence that's only going to establish a conclusion with probability. And sometimes people will make an unwarranted inference that's like they'll give you information that at best establishes a conclusion that's likely to be true, but they'll draw a conclusion that is supposed to be certainly true. Or they'll draw the conclusion that, this is definitely true or 100% true. And that's just an unwarranted inference. You can't move from some things being likely to be true or having evidence of something's being likely to a conclusion that it is certain. And this is something you have to watch for. People will slide a little bit in their arguments. They'll just slide ever so subtly from one to the other. So if you got that one right, very good. If not, don't stress at this point. I'm just giving you guys examples. All right, one last one here, and I want you to just read along and see if you can identify the flaw here. Time and time again, it has been shown that students who attend colleges with low faculty to student ratios get the most well-rounded education. As a result, when my children are ready to attend college, I'll be sure they attend a school with a very small student population. Now, this argument has a mistake, and I want you to think about this and try to see if you can identify what the mistake is here. Which of the following, if true, would be the greatest flaw in the reasoning above? And pause the video lecture and see if you can figure this out. If you said C, then you were absolutely right. And what this argument is assuming, it seems to be assuming that if you have a small student population that you'll have a higher student to faculty ratio, but that's just not true at all. You might have a school, let's say you had a school that only had 500 students, but they only had 2 professors. Then you'd have a very high student to faculty ratio. And so this is the mistake that this argument is making. It's making a mistake in assuming that, just because the student population is low, that you would have a much higher student to faculty ratio, and that's no guarantee of this. And this is just a type of mistake that you can see come up in an argument. And this is the thing that we focus on, and one of the skills we focus on in the study of logic is how to identify unwarranted inferences, or how to identify conclusions that we might say do not follow from the information that's been given. I don't know if this right here, this is a fallacy, if it has any kind of particular name, but even if it doesn't, a lot of these fallacies that occur have been well identified. They have names, and those are very handy. But even if it doesn't, just studying logic will allow you to better identify these mistakes when they do arise. Even if you've never seen the mistake before, even if you don't know the name of it, you'll just be more adept at saying, wait, I identify your argument, here are the steps to get to your conclusion, but there seems to be a jump in your logic, and here's what it is. This is going to be something we work on all semester long, just identifying arguments, identifying mistakes in the arguments, identifying assumptions that people make when they are arguing, and then also just identifying exactly even what people are saying, because sometimes people will slide in their meaning from one sentence to the next, and we're going to focus a lot on that as well. So this is supposed to be giving you guys a representative sample of the types of things we're going to be studying. We're going to do more. It's going to get even more technical than some of the stuff you've seen today. I'm not trying to scare anybody off. I've gone through this very, very quickly right now for you, just to get the briefest taste of what we'll be looking at. But we're going to go through this very systematically this semester. And going back to the earlier example where I was, giving you guys, I said, well, the form of this argument is if A, then B, not A, therefore not B. By the time we get to that, that's going to be really obvious to all of you, hopefully. It's by the time we get to breaking arguments down and using letters to represent propositions, that's something that's not, I think, going to be that terribly difficult. Actually, that might be the easiest thing we'll do this semester, because the answers will be very clear-cut in most cases. But we're going to go through this and we're going to basically learn how to break arguments down, to read more carefully. I know that sounds kind of like, I don't need to learn how to read. I already know how to read. But you're going to learn to read at a level of precision that maybe you've never been asked to. And we're going to look at mistakes that people make when they argue. And that's basically what we're going to be doing all semester long. So you might be scratching your head and thinking, God, this is really annoying and obnoxious already. And why in the world should I care about any of this? And the answer is, quite frankly, because arguments are all around you. I want you to just take a second and think about all the political controversy that we've been having in this country for the last, 200 years. But since the country was founded, or think about arguments in law, or think about arguments in religion, or whatever you want to focus on. They're all around you. You can see arguments everywhere. And what you're going to study is, you're not going to look and study, criminal justice in this class. We're not going to look specifically at, say, arguments for God's existence. We're not going to look at abortion. We're going to remove ourselves a step from that and just say, what is an argument at all? What is a good argument? What are the basis for sound reasoning? So if you're asking, well, why should I care about this? Then you're basically asking, well, why should I care about how to think well? Why should I care about how to reason well? Why should I care about how to be a critical reader when other people are trying to convince me of something? And I think the questions, they kind of answer themselves, because We want to make good points when we talk to other people. We want to make sound arguments when we talk to other people. We don't want to be taken in by a slick but fallacious line of reasoning when somebody else is trying to sell us on something. We want to be able to spot and identify mistakes in reasoning because we don't want to be a sucker or duped in any kind of way. So we're going to be, like I said, studying arguments at a level of depth that you probably haven't. And it is, I've mentioned this already, going to seem maybe a little tedious at times. It is going to seem a little bit obnoxious at times. And it is going to seem far removed from real world examples, but it's kind of like lifting weights. It's like, think of like a football player who lifts weights and on his off days in order to get stronger. He doesn't go out on the football field and bench press 500 pounds, but by making his muscles stronger, he's better able to run and defend and catch and throw or whatever it is he has to do. And that's what studying logic is really like. It's like the analog of lifting weights for the athlete. When you're talking with your friends or colleagues or coworkers or whomever, you're debating about various issues, having studied logic, you're going to have strengthened your critical thinking abilities well beyond anything that they have. And you're going to be in a much more advantageous position to analyze what they're saying, to be on guard when you're making your points, to make your points more precise, more accurate, more compelling. So, why should you care? I presume you should care because you care about truth, you care about evidence, you care about not looking foolish when arguing with people, and that's what this class is going to help you do. Now, also as a practical benefit to all of that, several of those examples I gave you, in particular the ones that had the options listed at the bottom, those were actually taken from standardized tests like the LSAT. So if any of you have ever considered, going to law school, you're going to have questions. Actually, those were exact LSAT questions. The entrance exam to one of the entrance exams to get into law school, you're going to have questions like, what is the flaw in this argument, or what is this argument assuming? You actually see these kinds of entrance exams on a lot. These kinds of questions on a lot of entrance exams. Some of you might have considered going to nursing school. There's an exam you have to take called the HESI, and that actually asks you questions about deductive and inductive arguments. I talked about that a little bit earlier. If you want to go to medical school, again, there's a critical reasoning component to that. So what we're going to be studying here is not going to be just advantageous for talking with people in general, but it's going to really train you to do better on any kind of you might say professional test that you have to take or entrance exam you have to take, because these critical thinking skills and these ability to read critically are often tested very heavily on those. But now I'd like to go over the requirements and the structure of this course. And I have organized this course to be a Tuesday-Friday class. Now I know that's kind of weird because most classes are either Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. Some are Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I've organized this so that you have class, or you should think of it as having a class on a Tuesday and a class on a Friday, because that gives students a little more time in between classes. If you have Monday, Wednesday, then that means, well, you'll have a class on, let's say, Monday, then you'll have just one free day, so to speak, to get your assignments done and turn it in on Wednesday. But then on Wednesday, you have all this time. You have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday before you have to turn it in on Monday. And so it's always been kind of weird to me. It's like one class you have just one day in between, whereas the other you're going to have, 4 or 5 days in between. So I tried to stretch out the time in between classes so it's a little more even. That affords you a little more flexibility. You don't have to do assignments right away as soon as a class period is over, so to speak. Now, what I mean here when I say classes organized Tuesday and Friday is that there's going to be a video lecture that becomes available every Tuesday at noon, and another one that becomes available every Friday at noon. And you have to watch that lecture. It's going to cover new content for the class. You watch it, and then you'll have a homework assignment that's going to be due afterwards. That homework assignment is going to be due by the following class. So let's say a video lecture becomes available on Tuesday at noon. Well, you watch it, have a homework assignment, then you're going to have that assignment. It's going to be due by Friday at noon. So it's like I said, it's kind of, you should think of it as a Tuesday, Friday noon class.
Now, you don't have to watch the lecture as soon as it becomes available. You might be at work that day. You might be in another class. That's just when it becomes available. You can watch it that evening. You can watch it on, let's say it becomes available Tuesday at noon. You can watch it Wednesday. You can watch it Thursday. You can watch it Friday morning. As long as you get that assignment to me by Friday at noon, I don't care when you watch it. So you do have that flexibility there. Now, for most classes, though not at the start of the semester, there are actually going to be 2 videos that become available every noon. It's either Tuesday at noon or Friday at noon. One of those lectures is going to cover new content. The other one is going to cover the answers to the previous assignment. So let's say you have an assignment I give you on Tuesday. Well, on Friday at noon, that's when that assignment is due. At 12:01, the answers to that night's or the previous night's assignment will become available. So you'll turn in an assignment, and then right after you turn it in, you'll be able to go over the answers for it. So there'll be a video lecture in which I do that. Then there'll also be a second lecture that becomes available at the same time that covers new content. So you're going to have 2 lectures, and like I said, you don't have to watch them at the same time. You might, be at work, so when it becomes available, maybe that Friday evening or maybe the next day on Saturday, you'll watch one of them. It'll go over the answers, and then on Sunday or maybe Monday, you'll watch the video that covers the new content for the class. So you do have this one nice thing about an online class. You have much more flexibility. You don't have to be in your seat at noon on Tuesday or Friday. That's just when the lectures become available. That's just when your assignments are due. So you can turn them in before that. The only thing is you better not turn them in after that, because as I say, moving your eyes down to homework right down here, your homework assignments are going to be due by noon. If I give you an assignment at Tuesday, that assignment is due by noon on Friday, and I do not accept late work. There's one chance in a million, which I will, and I'll talk about that in a second. But it's due at noon. If you get it in late, I don't care if it's the best homework I've ever seen in my life. If the mountains crumble and the oceans roar, you don't get credit for it. Now, the upside to this is to get credit for your assignment. It's basically a pass or fail assignment. All you have to do is give an honest effort and try to do the problems that have been assigned. And if you do, you have to do them all. You have to give an honest effort. And as a third thing, you have to get them turned in on time. You get full credit. All right. So it's either full credit or no credit for your homework. There are 25 total assignments. They're worth 4 points each. So for your homework, it's a total of 100 points that is possible to earn. And as long as you are trying and you are given a reasonable and honest effort to get your work done, and you get it done by the due date and due time, you get full credit for it. So it's in one way, the homework is graded on a pretty strict standard. On another way, it's a pretty relaxed standard, because as long as you're trying, you get full credit. But if you don't get it in and you don't try, or you don't do all the problems, you get no credit. There are also 4 exams. The exams are open book, open note. Any resources we use in class are available. It is not open classmate. You can't consult your classmates about them. It is not open, Google someone on the internet and get answers from them. It is not open internet, but it is open notes, open book exam. I say it's timed. That's misleading. I don't mean they're timed, but they are due by a certain time. And I also don't accept late work for these. It's funny enough, I'm a little more loose when it comes to, or a little more flexible, I should say, when it comes to accepting exams late. In fact, since I'm talking about it, let me just go to I'll come back to that in a minute. Sorry, I thought it was on the next slide, but I'll come back to that in a minute. But there are 4 exams. The exams are, the final exam is not cumulative. It is not comprehensive. The only sense in which it is comprehensive is that in logic, everything builds on everything else. So the first information we learn, we're going to actually be using that throughout the semester. So when it comes to the final exam, there aren't going to be any direct questions where I ask you stuff specifically covered in the first unit. But since we've been using that information all along, it is going to be kind of indirectly tested. So there are 4 exams, and here are the due dates and the weights for everything. Everything is total. Each assignment is worth 100 points total. So all of your homework together is 100. total points. Your exam number 1 is worth 100 points, exam number 2, 3, and 4. Here are the due dates for your exams. Now, each exam, with the exception of exam 4, I'm pretty sure, I should have looked this up, is due by midnight of the due date. So it's a little different. Your homework is always due by noon. But exam 1, 2, and 3 are due by midnight. So I give you a little more flexibility there because I know you might want to be tinkering with it after you get home from work or something like that. The only one that is not due by midnight and is due by noon is exam number 4. And the reason for that is I have to get your final exams graded by the next day. I have to get all of your grades in by the next day. So I just don't have the luxury of taking my time to grade these. I mean, it's got to be quick turnaround on them. So I need all the time I can to spare. So you can look this up. This is all on the course website. It tells you the due dates. You don't have to write this down. It's on the course syllabus. Like I was saying, when it comes to late work, I don't accept late homework. I say I don't accept. I mean, there's always that exception. There's that 1 in a million that I will. I would say for 99.9999% of the time, I'm not going to accept late homework. But I know that every once in a while, there is just this, extraordinary set of circumstances where a student just can't get their homework in. They've been in the hospital, for something or whatever happens. If you're that student, please just email me and we can talk about it. I would say by and large, late homework is not accepted, but there are those rare exceptions. When it comes to exams, I tend to be a little more flexible on these because each exam is just worth so much. If you don't get credit for one homework assignment, that's only 4 points out of a total of 500. That's not going to make or break you for the class. But if you lose 100 points on an exam, that can make or break you. So with exams, I'm a little more flexible, and I will allow students to take a late exam, but only with a legitimate excuse. When it comes to exams, if you know that you are going to not be able to get work in because of something unforeseen events happen, you need to email me and get out in front of that. And you need to tell me ahead of time, hey, this is going on, and let me know. If you're unable, I know sometimes students are unable because we have a lot of military students, for instance, and some will just get deployed at the last minute. And I won't hear from them for 2 weeks. They'll be like, oh yeah, I was in the South Pacific. I can't tell you about it, but any more than that. But okay, if something like that happens and you can't let me know ahead of time, email me afterwards. Now, the thing I need to emphasize is the burden is on you to come to me. This isn't high school. This isn't middle school. I'm not going to be looking over your shoulder and saying, hey, little Johnny, everything going all right? And I'm not doing it. You're an adult. I'm an adult. And you need to come to me. I will work with you. I'm a reasonable person. I will work with you. But you have to take some initiative and come see me. I'm not the big bad monster. I'm not going to attack you or bite you or whatever. But you should feel comfortable coming to me. Now, I do not owe you a late exam. I don't owe you that. It is completely up to my discretion as to whether or not you get to take a late exam. I determine what is a legitimate excuse, not you. So you can come talk to me. You can tell me about what's going on. I might ultimately say, you know what? That doesn't sound reasonable to me. But I don't know. I mean, everybody knows what is a legitimate excuse. You telling me that you were drunk and hungover, okay, that's pretty obvious. No, that doesn't cut it. He's like, oh, I had an 8-hour-long trip on shrooms, man. I couldn't get it done. It's like, all right, you should. The fact that you're coming to me with this, that's a sign that you have no clue what's going on. But I think we pretty much know what a legitimate excuse is. So it really rarely happens that I deny a student in this case because people know it's like medical, any kind of emergency, a work-related accident or something like that. Your child gets sick. They're at the doctor. Okay, I can work with you, but you do need to come talk to me. It's the burden is on you to come see me if events arise beyond your control, which don't allow you to get your work in. This class does have a required textbook. I try to, in most of my classes, not have a textbook because the textbook industry is just a racket. They really overcharge students for books. And it's disgraceful and shameful, I think. But sometimes you just can't avoid it. And this is a class where you have to do problems in order to learn. And there's just no way around having students buy a textbook. So I have you guys buy this book by David Kelly, The Art of Reasoning, 4th edition. This is not a perfect book, but it is serviceable. So there's most logic books are imperfect. Most textbooks are imperfect, and you kind of, when it comes to these things, you pick your poison. You know, it's like, well, do you like this over here? Do you dislike that over there more? It's always the way it is with textbooks. But this is a pretty decent book. Some of his examples are weird. I think he explains things well enough. All of the homework assignments, with one exception, are going to come directly from it. So you do need to get the book, or you need to get access to the book. You can rent the book. You can buy the book online. I think you might be able to get it cheaper off Amazon than in the student bookstore. I don't care if you get a used edition of the book. That's fine. If you, like I said, rent the book, that's fine. But you do need to have access to it in order to do the problems. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about the course website. And a lot of you, this might be really basic and intuitive. Maybe you've taken an online course before. Maybe you haven't. So I just want to walk you through it very, very briefly. When you sign into the course website, when you log in on Blackboard, it's going to look something like this. And not every week, but weeks that I think there's critical information for you to know, there'll be a weekly announcement. And so since this is the first week, obviously there's critical information for you to know. And here it is. You can look through this. You can read it. It'll tell you a little bit about what's going on. Over here on the left, there are going to be a couple of links that will be important for you. There's Start Here, which you can go through this. It'll tell you the first steps, how to navigate this course. It'll tell you a little bit about me, as boring as that might be. Course information. This one will probably be a little more useful to you on a week-by-week basis, but it'll tell you the due dates for the exams, which you just had this information. Here's a grading scale for the class. I didn't have a PowerPoint presentation on it, but there's the grading scale for the class. I have that listed right here. Grading policy, late and missed work. Again, you find out, you click on course information, click on that, and it'll take you right to it. The one that's probably the most important is course content by week. And I have laid this class out as the content is going to be presented week by week by week. Some professors do it by units. I do it by week. The reason for that is I think that when it comes to logic, I don't want students just doing all their assignments right at the beginning of the semester and just, ignoring me for the rest of the semester. I don't want you doing that. I want you to go through the information slowly. This takes a while. You have to process it. You have to go through it. And so all the information is laid out by week. And you are not really going to be able to work ahead too much beyond that week. So when you look here, you'll see, all the way through week 16. You can scroll through that. I know I scrolled through it kind of quickly. Week 1, August 20 through 24th. Here it tells you the learning objectives for the week. Click on this. And here it'll tell you this week's agenda. As I've already said, Tuesday, Friday is the way the class is laid out. So week 1, you watch Intro to Logic, and then you'll have a homework assignment. And this will be due by the next day. Down here, you'll see is video lectures for the week, the PowerPoint slides. There are a couple of weeks where we don't have PowerPoints because I have to use separate software to draw some stuff. But PowerPoint slides when available. This week's assignments. So you see right here, homework assignment number 1, homework assignment number 2. Now that doesn't tell you what to do. You click on this right here and tells you right here, gives you instructions for it. Now with the exception of homework assignment number 1, all the homework assignments are going to require that you type up the answers either in Microsoft Word. You can handwrite them, and you can maybe scan the assignment and then upload the scanned files, or you can even take pictures and upload the pictures. That takes up a lot of data and tends to be sluggish, and students don't prefer that. I think most students are content just to write up their answers in Microsoft Word. But you'll see here, it'll tell you the reading for that week, and then it'll tell you the problems that you complete. Notice that we're skipping all the way to chapter 4 to begin, but 2, 3, 6, 8. So you'll type those up, and then when you click on this, you'll then attach the file right here. So whatever, homework assignment number 2, you attach the file right there, and then you're done. Right here you can see the rubric for the assignment, and the rubric is the same for all the homework assignments. What I was telling you a second ago is you get 0 points if you did not submit it by time, you did not complete each problem, or you did not make a reasonable and honest effort to complete each problem. You get a total of 4 points for the assignment if you successfully completed it by the due date time, made a reasonable effort, and completed each problem. So it's pretty straightforward for that. course content by week. Now, if you come down here to week number 2, you'll see this, there's a little more going on. The first week's always a little slow, but this week right here is pretty representative of all the weeks we're going to cover throughout the semester. And basically, almost for every class, you're going to submit an assignment. Then you'll see right here, watch video lectures 1 and video lecture 2. There are almost always going to be 2 video lectures. The first one will cover the answers for this assignment. So assignment 2 is the one that's due on Tuesday. Then you'll watch and see how to properly answer those. You'll see the answers for it. Then there's going to be new information, which you see right here. There's a new video lecture, diagramming arguments. And then you'll have an assignment number 3, and that's going to be due by Friday. And then the pattern just repeats on Friday. You submit homework assignment number 3. You then watch the video lecture that covers the answers to those. Then you watch new information, and then you're given a new assignment. So it's very much like a math class in that regard. Now, if you look right here, it says, you have, for this week, you'll have 4 video lectures. Answers to homework assignment number 2, that's 1. Diagramming arguments, that's number 2. Answers to homework assignment number 3, that's 3. And then distilling arguments, that's new information. So that's 4 video lectures. But click right here. You only see 2 video lectures. All right, you only see video lecture 2, this is the new information, and video lecture 4. Where are the other ones? Well, I don't make the ones that have the answers to the homework available until you actually turn the homework in. That would defeat the purpose. Then you can just go through the video and just copy down all the answers. So those videos will become available at the appropriate times. So you can watch the new information. I don't really care so much about that. You can watch the new information, but what you can't do is see the answers to the homework until the due date and due time have passed for those. So they'll just automatically pop up at the scheduled time. So that's the way it is for every week. And I think that pretty much covers everything. I know it's a lot to take in at first. It can be a little bit overwhelming. Maybe my class is arranged differently than other people's, but if you just, fool around with the class a little bit, I think it should be pretty intuitive. The thing to keep in mind, I think big points here, is that the course assignments are scheduled, week to week. Assignments are going to be given on either Tuesday or Friday. Assignments are going to be due on Tuesday or Friday. So I think if you keep that in mind, it'll start to click and be intuitive to you. If you have any questions, if you're still a little if you're unclear about what's going on, please email me and I'll go over that. I'm really excited to have you in this class. I think this class is going to be extremely beneficial to everybody involved. And so I'm also really excited to meet you. If you would, just, if you feel the urge, just go ahead and shoot me an email and let me know that you're in the class. Tell me a little bit about yourself. I'd be really excited to learn a bit about each and every one of you. But again, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me, and we're looking forward to this semester.